I'm Greg Jarrett.
I'm Sandra Smith.
I'm Charles Payne, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, April 7th, 2023. I'm Jared Halpern. The former president's arrest and arraignment is dominating the political landscape. So how does a president or a presidential candidate rise above it?
There is a huge swath of the country and of the Republican Party, certainly, that likes that Trump is a fighter. This puts him in fighter mode.
We speak with Fox News Sunday host Shannon Bream.
I'm Dave Anthony. We've already let you hear some of Benjamin Hall's harrowing tale of surviving a Russian attack while he reported on the war in Ukraine. Today you hear the rest.
Everything that I'd fought for was getting home. Every single day, no matter how hard it was, that's what I held in my mind. Keep going. You're going home. You'll see your family again. You'll hold your daughters again.
And I'm Robert Jeffress. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
President Biden doesn't have anything to say about his predecessor's day in court. Neither does his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
What's important to the president is to continue to focus on the American people. That is what's important to the president.
So he's good to lay low for a couple news cycles now.
So look, here's the thing, Peter, and this is what we will speak to. We will speak to the fact that this is a president that has been able to get historic pieces of legislation done.
President Biden and members of his administration, like the vice president and cabinet officials, are spending the next few weeks on the road, going to factories and tech hubs, highlighting American manufacturing. Breaking through this week after the historic arrest and arraignment of former President Trump isn't just a challenge for the White House, though. Congressional Republicans and Republicans running for president are also spending time reacting to the case, defending Trump, and denouncing what they see as a political prosecution, instead of, say, getting as much ink as they'd like about new energy legislation. And it's been a boost so far for former President Trump.
Remember what President Trump said weeks ago at CPAC, that if he got indicted, he definitely would not get out of the race, and he thought it would help his numbers.
Shannon Bream is the anchor of Fox News Sunday and the author of the new bestseller, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak, Biblical Lessons on Romance, Friendship, and Faith.
I mean, he was very prescient about that, and it's forced all of his current rivals or potential rivals to fall in line and defend him and talk about this prosecution's overzealous and it's political and he's our guy, kind of. I mean, it really, in the primary scenario, was working out the best it possibly could for him. I mean, in the face of getting indicted, nobody wants that, I don't think. But to his political advantage, I mean, it's paying dividends.
Well, let's talk about sort of the steps with that. And I'm so glad that I can lean on your legal expertise here for a little bit, because I was surprised, at least initially, when I saw that the judge said, all right, our next hearing is going to be December 4th. And I thought, December 4th? My goodness, that's a long time.
Right.
And then some other attorneys that were talking were saying, well, actually, it's really not. That's pretty standard in a white-collar sort of case like this. What is going to happen between now and then? And are we going to learn anything new between now and then?
I mean, I think it's possible. We should get more detailed information from what Bragg has put together, because the indictment doesn't state the underlying crime explicitly. So I think we're going to get more of that information. It's going to be a lot of pretrial motions back and forth. I think that, people across the spectrum, left, right, and center, do think that this is probably a legally weak case, and that it could be very susceptible to motions to dismiss and other pretrial motions to kind of get rid of this thing. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. We should tell people there's a lot of hurry up and wait. In the meantime, you and I are keeping our eyes out for the Georgia case, for the two federal probes as well. So there will be things happening in various waves.
Well, and that was the next line that I was going to sort of go down, right? Because there are grand jury investigations in Georgia at the state level. And then here in Washington, the special counsel at the Justice Department is looking at two separate lines of inquiry that could lead to potential indictments or anything else as it relates to trying to overturn the election and the documents being mishandled in Mar-a-Lago. If either of those situations leads to an indictment, is there sort of do you have to get in line? In other words, can those move forward?
Yeah, which would be kind of a campaign nightmare for the former president, because I mean, those things all have to happen. They have to proceed on their own timelines, and they likely will. I mean, Georgia, if it decides to indict, I would guess would be sooner than the DOJ, only because we know that grand jury has wrapped up what they're doing. But it looks like the special counsel probes at the DOJ level are actually proceeding as well. I mean, there's a lot going on there with witnesses being called and testimony being ordered by judges. And so, I mean, all of these could fall in the former president's lap by 2024 in the midst of caucuses and debates and all of those things. It could be a really busy time for him. It's not just the legal trouble, which, I think is a very real thing, but how do you campaign against that? I mean, he will use it, as he has successfully done, to say, look, the deep state and the establishment's after me. But you have to think about the logistics of being pulled in multiple different courtrooms and places when you're supposed to be out, eating corn dogs in Iowa. So there are the logistical things too.
Well, and at some point you would expect, and we've heard it a little bit. I talked to Asa Hutchinson earlier this week, and he sort of said, listen, there's just too much chaos surrounding the former president. At some point, that's going to have to be a question for Republican voters.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see if Asa Hutchinson or Nikki Haley or, Ron DeSantis or anybody else can convince
Mike Pompeo, anybody who may be getting into the race.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be a different lane. They're going to be, I'm the anti-chaos. I can get things done. I'm a statesman. But there's a huge swath of the country and of the Republican Party, certainly, that likes that Trump is a fighter. This puts him in fighter mode. And I think that just reminds them of what they did like about him, about the things that he's willing to go to the wall. And he'll say, they're coming after me to try to get to you. It's a very effective line when you're trying to excite primary voters. So I don't know that there's a lane for the anti-chaos candidate, and certainly not more than one.
Right. The other thing that has happened here is we have seen Republicans really rally around the former president, in so much so is now we're hearing that they want to subpoena Alvin Bragg, the district attorney. What role would a federal congressional inquiry have on a local prosecution?
I think what part of their, argument is going to be that federal funds do flow to these state prosecutors or to their offices or into the state coffers, and so that they have some sort of oversight role for how federal dollars are spent. There's been a very full-throated defense by Bragg's office saying, we run independent, autonomous investigations at the state level. At the local level, you have no right to come and see what we're up to or call us to Capitol Hill. And there are a lot of folks, even, I would say center right, who say, like, I don't know that these committees are really, have the jurisdiction to do any of this. It would be very interesting to see if Congress would subpoena him. I think he's probably going to have some pretty strong legal arguments that he doesn't need to show up. And, a lot of people who don't show up for congressional subpoenas, a handful of them have paid for it, but a lot of them just kind of skate on with their lives.
It'll be interesting to see. The other thing that I think is going to be interesting, because you've heard this as well, maybe local district attorneys can now, indict Democrats. Is that sort of a precedent that's been set, or are there still some sort of legal guidelines here that are going to set the rules for the road?
Well, you've got House Oversight Chair James Comer saying, I've gotten calls from Tennessee, from Kentucky, from county prosecutors there who say they've got things they want to dig into with the Bidens. And already on the Hill, there are multiple investigations going on with various members of the Biden family and business interests and things that have gone on there. But yeah, I mean, we have crossed a line now where we've got a prosecution, an indictment of a former president for the first time. And, I think some of these prosecutors, why would they sit back and not take advantage of that if this is going to turn into a political fiasco? It's sort of like when the left now says, we're going to add seats to the Supreme Court, and the right's like, great. So when we get in, we're going to do it too. You and I both know, covering the Hill, that you try to caution people, whatever party's in charge, when they decide to bust up norms and change rules to get their things done, you got to remember that the other side is going to do it when they're in power.
You mentioned the Supreme Court. Let's talk about a state Supreme Court. A big win for the Democrat that flips control of Wisconsin Supreme Court on a race that, at least from, my outside view, seemed to hinge a lot on abortion rights, of access to abortion, and longstanding abortion laws.
Yeah, and it wasn't even close. I mean, this is one of those things where Democrats are having some good nights. Progressives are having some good nights.
Yeah, in Chicago, the progressive mayor ones.
Yeah, I mean, how much is that a canary in the coal mine for Republicans? Like, they're really struggling with this abortion issue. Do you embrace it and go full-throated and say, like, hey, Do we want to be like North Korea, or do we want to have more reasonable restrictions? So they've got a lot of internal strife over this. I mean, that Wisconsin race was almost totally, at least in the campaigning and the discussion, about abortion. So Republicans have got to figure out how they're going to handle that issue, because I don't think they handled it well in the midterms either. And they would have to admit that.
Mm-hmm. And listen, we talk about, Wisconsin, Michigan. These are states that have now shown that they are going to be maybe the most important states on the electoral map in 2024.
Yeah, and they're the heart of the country. They're heart of that sort of path to the presidential, address here in Washington. We think of the heart of the country, key states like Ohio and, like you said, Michigan, Wisconsin, others that, are really critical to whoever is going to take the White House. And when you see so much of the trending blue in these special elections and different cases, it's got to give the Republicans pause. And I think it points out a couple of really tough issues that they've got to deal with. It used to be that Republicans and conservatives were better at turning out in these special elections and getting mobilized, but the left has certainly figured it out.
Yeah, and we've heard that as well from, the RNC chairman talked about the amount of money that was spent. A Democrat in that Supreme Court race raised a ton more money, spent a lot more money than the Republican as well. And that's a big part of winning elections these days.
Yeah. A lot of people hate that, kind of leaves a taste in their mouth, but it's true. It's sort of like negative ads. Like people say, oh, it's terrible. I hate them. They work. Get money out of politics. Well, it works. So until you find a way to, I don't know whether you want to regulate or limit those things. You got to admit, whichever side you're on, they work.
They do, which is why they keep doing them and keep raising more money and seeing these tactics play out. Let me really quickly there, when and if President Biden formally announces a second term, what are you hearing about that? I know that there's kind of this thought that, well, there's no rush here, right? But at some point, you do have to start campaigning.
Yeah, you do. But remember, this is a president who won by not doing a lot of traditional campaigning. We were in the middle of COVID. Yeah. He did a lot from his basement. So they probably feel like they have time. I mean, the power of the incumbency is very strong. When I was over at that lunch the day of the State of the Union, when they invite over journalists to have lunch with the president, that was the first time that I came away from it thinking that legitimately there was some chance he wasn't going to run. Just the vibe and the conversation with him that day, I thought, I don't think he's decided 100% that he's actually going to do this. So it's interesting. I mean, his approval ratings are not good. He's upside down on everything from the border to foreign policy to inflation. I mean, there are good numbers, but he is the incumbent. And if it's a rematch with somebody he's beat before, he's got to feel pretty good about those chances.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that as well, too, that, if Donald Trump is a Republican nominee, the scoreboard, right? The win-loss
I beat him
record,
before. So. Yeah, that's going to be his number one argument for sure.
What are we going to see Sunday on Fox News Sunday?
Well, we've locked in Senator Lindsey Graham. We're going to talk about a lot of foreign policy, this new unrest in Israel, obviously China, Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine, Syria. I mean, there are so many hotspots out there. We're going to talk about the rise of AI. Are we under or overreacting on that? By the way, as you well know, we have not settled our debt ceiling or the budget fight. So plenty to talk about. We will be able to probably announce our Democrat a little bit later today. But I think we got a lot for our panel to discuss. And we will also have a special feature on the show that talks about, 2 holy days, holy times, holy celebrations of Passover and Easter overlapping each other this year and kind of what we can learn from each other's faiths.
And on that point, congratulations as well on now the number 2 bestseller on the New York Times list, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone out there who picked up a copy. And I just hope it'll be encouraging.
Shannon, always love our chats. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jared.
This is Robert Jeffress with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
It's a story so compelling, we had to tell it twice.
Out of nowhere, this big whistle phew, landed about 30 feet in front of us, and immediately we knew that we were under attack.
Then Benjamin Hall says a second bomb hit while he was reporting on the front lines of the war in Ukraine, and it knocked him out. And then one of his children came to him as he lay wounded in a vision.
And I saw her right in front of me, my daughter, who's called Anna. And she said, "Daddy, you've got to get out of the car." She said, "You've got to get out of the car." And amazingly, I came back. I opened my eyes.
Then the third Russian bomb hit.
That one threw me away. And the next thing I know, I wake up, I'm on fire. My right leg's missing. My left foot's gone. I'm bleeding badly.
He was lying next to his Fox News colleague, photographer Pierre Zakshevsky, who did not survive, killed with the rest of the crew. Then Ben saw a car go by, but they could not see him lying there.
I began dragging myself up the slope towards the road where that car had passed. And maybe 10 minutes later, that car with Ukrainian special forces had actually got lost down the road, and they came back. And at that point, I was higher up, and I had a handful of dirt and rocks, and I was throwing it at the car, and they saw me.
And they, in a group called Save Our Allies, helped get our badly injured reporter on a train to Poland.
Doesn't matter how you feel right now. You're alive. You're going home. You got to keep going.
And that's where we left off in part one. Here's the rest of the story of Fox News correspondent Benjamin Hall, who has a new book, Saved, a war reporter's mission to make it home.
I found a new level to myself on that train ride. I found a place where you have to go when you are experiencing just the worst and the worst pain that you can imagine. And we did it. And we got through to Poland about 10 hours later, and on the other side of the border there was the American 82nd Airborne was waiting for me. The Black Hawk was there. Its rotors were on, and they loaded me onto that, and I was into the hands of the U.S. military. And Secretary of Defense Austin had given me permission, special permission as a journalist, to be treated inside military medicine. And that also saved me. I went first to Landstuhl in Germany, a big US base where all the injured from Afghanistan and Iraq were treated. They'd seen injuries just like mine. It's called polytrauma, limb loss, eye loss, big burns, traumatic brain injury. And they had me for 10 days before passing me to San Antonio and BAMC, the Brooke Army Medical Center. And I spent the next 6 months on a military base, learning how to walk again, learning how to live again, and fighting to get home again. Today, I speak to you from home, a year later.
When did you finally get a chance to tell your wife, I'm alive, I'm here?
Yeah, I remember just the one thing I needed was my phone. And there's videos of me inside the Ukrainian hospital when they found me, and all I could ask for was my phone. I just wanted to hold on to my phone. And I finally called her from the train, and she said I was sounding really quite optimistic. I just said, I'm okay. Don't worry. I said, don't you worry. I'm coming home. I'm alive. Don't worry. I'm coming home. I didn't know that Pierre or Sasha had died at that point. I thought they'd been saved. And so that was another difficult moment there. But that was the first time I told her. And my wife is the most incredible person. I'm a lucky man. I've married the most amazing woman. And at that moment then, she knew she needed to know everything, where to take me, how best to treat me, who she had to speak to. And she worked hand in hand with Fox and the doctors and the military to find the best place for me. And, she's been stronger than I have through all of this, and we've got through it together.
What about seeing your children and the daughter who appeared to you in that car out of what you wrote was deep blackness?
Yeah. Well, I didn't see my daughters for about 6 months, and the decision was that they wouldn't come and join me in Texas. I decided, along with my wife, that we didn't want them to see me unable to move, so badly injured. My 3 daughters are at the ages of, at the time, 2, 4, and 6. And we just thought it's going to be so unhealthy for them to come and sit by my bed in ICU when I can't move. That would have helped me, but it wouldn't have helped them. And the decision was for me to get quick and get better as fast as I could and then go home. And so, again, that was about 6 months later when I finally got home again. And that moment, and I'd been talking to them on FaceTime and videos, but that moment I walked in the door, and I remember them just all running and holding on to me and wouldn't let go, just wouldn't let go. Tears of joy, everything that I'd fought for was getting home. Every single day, no matter how hard it was, that's what I held in my mind. Keep going. You're going home. You'll see your family again. You'll hold your daughters again. Well, that was for that moment when I walked into my house. And I still feel that way every time I hug them. Every single time I get this physical emotion that I didn't feel before. It's amazing.
So now, as you continue your recovery, what are you thinking about for your career?
Well, I can't wait to start working again. I had a job I absolutely love. more than anything, I have met incredible people, and I'm so inspired by their stories, and I want to get back to telling those stories. And for 15 years, I've covered wars, and I've told some of the worst stories in the world, and I've seen some of the worst things in the world. And what I've actually realized now, what I would like to focus on, are some of the uplifting things, some of the hopeful stories, some of the inspiring stories, the people who came to help me into Ukraine, the doctors who helped me, all the people around, and the staff, and our viewers and our audience who all reached out. Those things are so powerful. They're so uplifting. That's another thing that got me through. And so I want to go back to work, and I want to start telling, at first, some of these uplifting stories. I want to say that these things unite us. There's so much division in the world, but people who are kind and generous and share themselves and what they've got, that's the story I want to look at. So I'll go back to the news as soon as I can when I'm walking a bit better. But I think I want to focus on that as well, on the positives in life.
When you look back, I mean, you were all these areas. I remember we had you on the podcast after you had gone to like the last ISIS stronghold in Syria, and you talked to one of their captured fighters. I mean, you were on all these war zones. Did you ever imagine that this could happen? What did happen to you?
No, about 7 colleagues of mine have died over the years. People I've known and have worked with. So I knew it happened. I knew the horrors happened, and but I never really thought it would happen to me. I always wondered how I would behave if I was injured, or if I went through it, and I'd seen other people being badly injured before. But, you have to put your fear aside to do this job. You're going to cover wars. You have to put aside that fear, and you have to go into it and focus on the work and the story. And that's how you do it, is that you focus on that. So I never paid too much attention to it. So didn't think it would happen, but it did happen. And to be honest, I'm quite proud with how I've come through it.
Well, it is inspiring. Your optimism, your positive outlook. I would think with all that you went through, it would be easy to maybe be bitter or angry. Certainly, you've seen people who have a hard time with these kinds of catastrophic injuries. What makes you be so positive?
Well, I really think the world is an amazing place. It's a kind place. It's a warm place. And I don't remember the horrors. I don't remember what's happened to me and think of my injuries and what happened. I remember the good. And I remember all the people who came. There is more good out there than there is evil. I know that. And I think we've all got to go out and live it. And I also think that Pierre, Sasha, what a disservice to them if I didn't make the most of my life, if I didn't grab every opportunity I had. I know they'd want me to do that. I'd want them to do that if it had been the other way around. So I think every day that I wake up, I think, today's for Pierre. I'm going to live this for Pierre and Sasha. And I'm going to go and make the best of today. And I'm going to, do everything as well as I can for them. So they give me strength every single day. My family give me strength every single day. Everyone who's been kind to me gives me strength every single day. And I have spoken to a lot of people who have had similar injuries as I've had, veterans. And some people don't come out of it like I have. And we've got to think about them too. Some people lose their identity and their confidence and their future. And those are the people we've got to think about. I mean, you've got to talk about some of the suicides that we're seeing among the veterans. It's a real problem. And, if I can do something, it's to help reach out to them, perhaps try and show them that there are good things to work on, and not just big things. It's not about trying to get to the other line. It's about doing small things every day, little improvements. Every day, just find something else little to improve, get a little bit further. And eventually those add up, and they slowly add up. And then over time, you've come a long way. And so, I've been very lucky, and I hope I can help others who haven't been so lucky.
You referenced it that as a journalist, you tell, and have been for years, telling other people's stories. Has it been difficult with you being the story, the focus on you?
Yeah, it is funny because, for years we've been telling the stories, and I always felt that it's not. Some journalists go out there and they tell the story about how they got there and what it was like for them. And I was never that kind of a journalist. I always thought that we tell the stories of the people we meet. That's what our audience need to know. They need to know about them. So suddenly here I am, and I've become the story. And at first I thought, well, maybe that's not really what I want to be doing. But I have started to see many people being inspired by my story who are reaching out to me. So if telling my story, if becoming the story can help others, then I'm happy to do that. I hope that we can move on and talk about other, in the future, talk about other work. But for now, this is the focus, and I don't mind it.
Congratulations. Your book, #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. I can't imagine you thought that could happen.
No, I was hoping perhaps that we might make the somewhere on the list, and I didn't know what interest there would be in the book. But I mean, I'm so honored that so many people have read it, so many people have enjoyed it. And what I like is that everyone finds something different in the book that they like. Everyone I speak to finds little tidbits throughout that they find interesting. So I think it actually works on a whole lot of many levels. And so, no, I'm really pleased that it's done well. And just, I suppose, thank you for everyone who's read the book.
Well, I look forward to a chance to see you in person the next time you can get to New York. And I also look forward to seeing you back with your reports and the stories that you'll be doing for us. In the meantime, congratulations again on your new book that is #1 on the bestseller list, Saved, a War Reporter's Mission to Make It Home. Fox News foreign correspondent Benjamin Hall. A real honor and a real pleasure and delight to talk to you. Thank you so much.
No, the honor's mine. Thank you. And I'll see you in person next time.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
A giant red spoon that was stolen from an Arizona Dairy Queen has been found, in part thanks to a popular outdoor game app. Michael Foster was playing Pokemon Go when he saw the 15-foot spoon on the ground behind a fence that surrounds a Phoenix middle school baseball field. That's just a couple miles from the Dairy Queen where it went missing. Foster says the first thing he did was send a picture of it to his wife and said, "It's the spoon." The police were called. They strapped it to the top of a police cruiser, and they've since released video of the theft, which happened on March 25th, showing 2 men and 1 woman getting the spoon and putting it on a large flatbed truck. Investigators are still looking for the people who took the spoon and have asked the public for tips. The owners of the Dairy Queen, that's the home of the spoon, say they're thankful for the discovery. It would have cost them $7,000 to replace it. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Pull up a chair and join me, Rachel Campos Duffy,
and me, former U.S. Congressman Sean Duffy, as we share our perspective on the discussions happening at kitchen tables across America.
Download From the Kitchen Table, The Duffys, at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you download podcasts. Subscribe to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Robert Jeffress.
What's on your mind?
Occasionally, somebody asks me, "Pastor, what is the hardest thing you've ever had to do in ministry?" I always give the same answer. The experience is seared in my consciousness as if it happened yesterday. It was a Palm Sunday at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon more than 20 years ago. Our church's annual Easter pageant was going to start in a few hours. I received a phone call telling me that a couple in the church, a husband and wife, had just been killed in a motorcycle accident. The extended family asked if I would go to the couple's home to tell their 2 grade school daughters that their parents were dead. I thought about that moment again when I heard about the shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville several weeks ago. Imagine delivering the news to parents or to children whose loved ones innocently went to school and lost their lives due to a senseless act of violence. What would you say to those experiencing such a sudden, horrific loss? What solace or hope could you offer? Every worldview or philosophy should have to answer that question. Would you be able to offer these families any real hope other than just wishful thinking and sweet platitudes? Easter is the only reason I have something to say when I look into the eyes of those who are experiencing the worst tragedies this life can offer. Easter represents the historical fact that death has been conquered. For all of human history, death had had a perfect record. It was unbeaten. From the strongest and most powerful to the weakest and most vulnerable, death got them all in the end, until Jesus. Christians have insisted from the very beginning that Jesus died on Good Friday and was truly resurrected from the dead on Easter Sunday. This wasn't a fable. As the Apostle Peter wrote, we did not follow cleverly devised myths. The Apostle Paul underscored just how essential the resurrection was to the Christian faith. He wrote, "If Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain." Every alternative explanation put forward by skeptics, that Jesus appeared to die or that his disciples stole the body, is far-fetched past the point of absurdity. The resurrection wasn't dreamt up by Christ's first followers to make themselves feel better. More than 500 eyewitnesses saw Jesus dead and buried and then saw him alive again. The resurrection is a fact in the past that offers hope for our future. It means death is not the end for us or our loved ones. If we believe in Jesus Christ, we will one day receive the very same type of body he received, one that will never age or get sick again. Easter also offers comfort for the present. Families who experience the sting of death of a loved one experience the darkest moment in their lives. Perhaps you have just experienced a tragedy or lost a loved one, and you are feeling despair and heartbreak. The message of Easter will not erase your grief and your pain right now, but through Christ you can experience grief differently. As the Bible says, those who place their faith in Christ do not grieve as others who have no hope. Easter is God's reminder that although our suffering is real, it is also temporary. If you are feeling the sting of death or the pain of any other loss in your life, then I would encourage you to remember the reality of Easter. The resurrection is a fact in the past that offers hope for the future and comfort for the present for all who will trust in the Jesus who promised, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live again." This is Robert Jeffress for Fox News.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. And now, stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. Listen ad-free on Fox News Podcasts Plus on Apple Podcasts. And Prime members can listen to the show ad-free on Amazon Music. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. New from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Dana Perino. Join me for Season 3 of my limited-time podcast, Everything Will Be Okay, based on my best-selling book of the same name. Make sure you subscribe to this series wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.